Can't tell. All right, it started. Okay. Excuse me. All right. Watch my mind already went blank on everything. Okay. There we go. Well, it kind of fits. Okay. Well, welcome to class, everybody. Today in American history, because that's where we're at, we're going to be learning a little bit about Prohibition and the rise of organized crime. I thought it'd be a little fun. So let's pretend that my last name is Haig. So let's pretend we're in the U.S. and we're in a different new state called the state of Haigiana. Okay, and you are citizens of Haigiana. Now, recently, if you notice, over in Congress and other places, there's been a lot of debates, and even in states, about legalization of marijuana. Should we make it legal? Should we allow to smoke it, recreation, and so forth? So real quick, just by a raise of hands, as citizens of Haigiana, who votes yay for legalizing marijuana? Raise their hands. Okay, thank you. All those against, please raise their hands. Okay, great. So that's good. All right, so we'll start. Let's work our way. What's one reason why you would vote against that?
One reason why is because I think that although it can help medical reasons, I think that it would be most for recreational, and sometimes it's not good for your brain.
Thank you. No, that's all right. Valid reason.
I agree.
Anything else you'd like to add? Well, you're the one vote against, or I guess for legalizing marijuana in the state of Haigiana. What's one of your reasons why?
Well, looking at other states that have legalized it, their economy has gone up a lot because they tax it very highly. So in a lot of other areas in their communities and everything, they've used that tax money that the state gets and the government gets from the marijuana to rebuild stuff and to make the economy better.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, that's just what Brenda said. I think people are going to take advantage of it.
Okay, use marijuana that way. All right, great. Well, I just kind of wanted to bring that up as an idea to kind of something that's going on today. Because back in the 1920s, or a little bit before that, actually, around World War I, there was a movement to be against alcohol. And so we're going to take a look at that. So let's see if we can get this to work. All right. If you guys wanted to know a key date, that's when Prohibition started. Basically, making alcohol illegal. But first, we're going to take a look at the temperance movement. Now, I'm going to pass out for our quiz already. And the nice thing, this one's open now. Open presentation, open teacher quiz. So the nice thing about it is you can ask questions. You don't have to raise your hand. If something comes to mind, feel free to just ask. Or if you have any conversation point you'd like to bring up, that's absolutely fine. But the nice thing is, please just fill it out as you go along. You can read the questions at the bottom. We'll be going over those. But if there's something that you didn't understand, that's okay. You can leave a question or you can ask it in class. Because when I return it to you later on, you can use it as a study guide. And you'll know the parts that you need to focus on and parts and the parts that you'll be okay. All right, so the temperance movement and the 18th Amendment. The temperance movement is when mostly a lot of women and men, but mostly a lot of women were against alcohol. They wanted to make it illegal. I guess off the top of your heads, why would you think women in particular would want to make alcohol illegal?
Because their husbands drink it all the time.
Husbands drink too much. Okay, great. What else? Why else do you think they might want to do that? In particular, women. It was a big movement amongst women. That's all right. Well, we're going to be talking about it, but I just wanted to have you guys thinking that that is a key thing here. So I kind of made this as like kind of like a newspaper and headline. So one of the big reasons is yes, their husbands were drinking too much. Men were just drunk in the street a lot. They're consumption of alcohol was about 3 times the amount as today, the average person. You drink hard liquor and so forth. So there's a lot of drunkenness out in the streets. Drunk people do a lot of dumb things, as we know, and a lot of women and children were kind of the, you know, the term, you know, kick the cat kind of thing. They're the ones that kind of would actually physically take beatings. And so during World War I, you know, alcohol was looked at as, you know, one of the causes. Germany was kind of the main enemy back then too. And so a lot of the brewers were German. So there's another connection that they would make that alcohol was, you know, really bad. And so eventually the 18th Amendment was simply banning alcohol. That's what it was. It was now illegal to have. You can consume certain amounts of it, but like simple wines that weren't too heavy, but it was banned. And it kind of opened up a doorway here. So this is how the stage is set. We're going to be kind of, I wish you could see that. Oh, great, there we go. It kind of opens up a doorway. I kind of like to look at it that everyone and his neighbor became a criminal overnight, practically. Prohibition turned a lot of just everyday citizens into, you know, doing illegal acts. They became criminals because they would be either producing themselves alcohol or they started selling it to their neighbor. And it could vary. I put a few examples, some big time names. Roy Olmsted, he lived up in the Northwest, and he was a police officer in the police force. And he was known as the good bootlegger. Bootleggers were people that transferred alcohol around and sold it illegally. And he was known as a good bootlegger because he kind of paid everybody to, you know, just let it slide. But paid different people in the police force, legislation and so forth, just to kind of place a blind eye towards it. Everyone was drinking just as much, if not more, as when Prohibition started. Another gentleman, George Remus here, he was a, you know, in Chicago, or in the Midwest of Chicago, he was a lawyer and attorney, and he figured out a way to, that vertical integration talks about how he basically figured out how to make it, ship it, and deliver it to the places. That's what vertical integration. Every step of the process he was in control of, and started making great amounts of money. Now, America sent a task force to go up against and find all these people that were creating this illegal alcohol and selling it. And eventually, one of the things it did is it started to flood the court systems. They just started to have almost half of their different court cases were involving these, you know, people illegally consuming or selling alcohol. And so they would just start in masses, just having people, all right, we're gonna have you all, this is your sentence. Take it, and then just take people in masses because it was so much. Any of you guys familiar with speakeasies? Ever heard of that term? Okay, cool. You might have seen it. You ever read the book, The Great Gatsby? Watch the movie Great Gatsby. You know, if someone comes up to a door and they slide the door open, you give a code, and then they let you in, and there's a big drinking party going on inside. That's what speakeasies were. They're like illegal nightclubs where people would go to drink. Interesting enough, women weren't the biggest drinkers, but after Prohibition, it became something illegal, a little something more, you know, in a way kind of desirable, something that you're not supposed to do, and something acceptable for now women were able to drink more, so it became more of something that was acceptable amongst women to be drinking in public. Okay. One of the other things too, I kind of like this quote. Would someone like to read it for me? This was a Chicago native at the time of Prohibition who said this.
Prohibition gave the average criminal, extortionist, bank robber, bank thief, murderer, pickpocket, gave him a cover. Now instead of saying that he's a thief or he's a thug or he's a slug, they'd say he works on Prohibition trucks, he serves beer, how bad can that guy be? They gave him a cover for just about everything.
So what is the saying about criminals and Prohibition? Making alcohol illegal. What did it do?
It made everybody criminal, even though they weren't as bad as other criminals.
Close. Well, it sure is here about bank robbers, thieves, and murderers, and pickpocketers. basically people that are already doing bad. But now they had a cover of, oh, well, they're just, a guy selling alcohol, how bad can it be?
Because everybody's
Everybody sold alcohol, right? Yeah, and it wasn't seen as a bad thing. Over in Chicago, they had, mostly it worked well in in the villages and towns and so forth, where it was, people kind of just upheld the law and would do it, but in the big cities, prohibition just didn't work. And this guy, you might have heard of him, Scarface. He was kind of famous, Al Capone. He basically took over Chicago and was able to kind of run the city. He was able to pay off the cops because as he received money from this illegal business, because people wanted it, it was a big, desirable thing since it was now illegal. He was able to profit, and he used a lot of terrorizing. He became very notorious for doing a lot of bad acts, causing a lot of crime. And the other thing too is, in every place, even in like the executive branch, like the president, alcohol was still done. The police, in that case in Chicago, the police commissioner there, chief, he said that 60% of his workforce as police officers were not part of prohibition, but were part of the illegal act of selling. So people weren't really following it. And legislators, they weren't, following it as well. One of the things here I kind of like on that little slide, guys, it's kind of like Harry Potter. Look at this.
If you were a thug, if you were a pickpocket, a safe cracker, a yag as they called it at the time, you were making a little bit of money here and there at great risk, but you were never going to get rich. Suddenly prohibition comes along, and you can do the same thing you were doing before, just delivering some illegal goods from one place to another, supplying somebody with something they weren't supposed to have, but now you're making a fortune. And once they start making this fortune, they've got power, they've got money to start buying politicians, which means they can make greater fortunes. So prohibition was the greatest thing that ever happened to the goons.
All right, great. So how did making alcohol illegal, how did that increase the crime rates?
Say it again.
By making alcohol illegal, how did that increase the crime rates?
I think like you said, it made other crimes easier, because people think like, oh, he's just selling alcohol, but then like they murder you also.
No big deal.
So like murders and that stuff was like easier to get away with because people were less like expecting it less.
No, that's good. People would think of him as just, a regular person, so they could use it as a mask. Also, again, people still would consume the alcohol, so everyone overnight, a large part of the nation just became criminals because it was something that became illegal. So, I guess, let's take a look at some of the other things that we kind of see today. Some of the aftershocks of prohibition, some debates we have today about it. Eventually, because nobody was following the law really over time, there was a lot of increase in crime from all these kind of things like drug dealers, that's kind of what they were. They were selling alcohol. These bootleggers were like drug dealers. They would have gang warfare going on in the streets. People were just getting killed and murdered all the time. They would have, different fighting back. So here's a few thoughts or a few things that come from different scholars on the subject matter. One thing that we kind of found out in America is that you cannot regulate morality. And when you try, you just create an atmosphere right for criminals. They can profit off of it. You've made something taboo. All right, well now there's a demand for it. Now you've given them control. Whereas you kind of mentioned earlier with that marijuana, how the government could tax it. We do that also with like cigarettes. There's people that want it. All right, well, to control it, they tax it, they can profit instead of having it go to people like criminals and so forth. Another big thing is this one, which comes from the book Drug War Crimes, The Consequences of Prohibition. There was to come say, all right, hey, this guy wronged me. Well, what can you do? You're doing something illegal. You're going to go to the police and say, hey, he took all my alcohol. You know, you can't do that. You're doing something illegal. You're basically giving yourself up. So what else can they do if they want to get vengeance or get justice for being wronged? Shoot, kill. There's a lot of, basically more illegal acts follow from that so that they can seek their retribution. So that was another consequence from making alcohol illegal with the 18th Amendment. And another thing is just increase in crime, homicides. We still see this today, at least in America, mostly south of the border. Go to, well, further south past Mexico, Colombia and so forth, they have cocaine and other things where, you know, this kind of lifestyle, I mean, it still exists in a way in America too, but it was really, it's still really heavy today. So eventually, after the 18th Amendment really didn't work, they kind of cast a new vote and they submitted for the Constitution the 21st Amendment, which was to basically lift the ban on alcohol. Like, this doesn't work, so they lifted it and made it legal again. So basically what they did too is for all those criminals, they just pulled the sheet from underneath them. They had no stage to stand on anymore because, oh, it's legal now, so now they don't have control, they don't have the power over it. So, just to kind of, I guess there was one more thing. I also just changed the way people, Americans in particular, society, they viewed, you know, especially government, when they look at cops, before you would respect a cop and they were there to do honorable things, but now it's like, oh, is he a bootlegger, is he with the mob? You don't know. So, same thing with legislators, presidents, you know, they weren't sure who was doing the right thing or not. So last thing, every newspaper needs to have the funnies. So here's just a few different cartoons from back then, and just, you know, the way that people view organized crime. Well, police can't do anything. They're just sitting there with loads of money and they're bulletproof. There's nothing that they could do to harm them because they had the money, they had the power. They could continue to do that. So I've just put a quote from Churchill here. Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So there's a lot that we can learn when we look back at it. I mean, we might not agree. I mean, as Mormons, we're kind of not for alcohol, right? Probably a big reason why you would vote against, you know, I don't want to make it legal or illegal. Well, you know what I'm trying to say. But still, there are consequences from doing such things. So, I guess from what we've kind of discussed here, what's one of the social responses that Americans had, or one of the changes that you learned today? Just think it over, a different social change that happened from America making alcohol illegal. And if you like, just share it with your neighbor.
What was the question?
Just think of one of the social changes, or responses. Well, from Prohibition that happened back then in the 1920s and 30s there. So before we move on, what were some of the questions you have that are about Prohibition, or maybe something even involving with today?
So you said that the women were the ones that wanted to get rid of it, like make alcohol illegal, but then once it became illegal, women were the ones that like wanted to go to the speakeasies and drink it. So why is there that change?
They want what they can't have.
That's a big thing with human nature. Yes, you want what you can't have. But a lot of it too is when I mentioned that in the towns and the countryside of America, the farmers and so forth, it was followed pretty well actually. But in the major cities, that's where you really saw this shift of just ignoring it. And basically they were consumers. Oh, they'll pay for this alcohol, let them in. And then men and women were intermingling. Before, men would kind of, they would go to their cigar room, they would drink and be separated from the women when they had their tea or coffee or whatever they did. But in this case, now they were intermingling. They were in those speakeasies, they were, socializing more, and it just became a norm. Oh, if she has a drink, I have a drink, we're all drinking. And so it just increased women, it may open the door for women to have it socially be acceptable to drink. So main reason for being against it was there was a lot of drunk men. Drunk men are stupid and do a lot of bad stuff. And the reason why women started drinking, well, it was part of the socializing. Now they were being more accepted into it. That's a great question. What other questions might you have from what we discussed today? Well, if you have any, you can feel free to write it down, or if there's something that you weren't able to fill out, and you have a question, feel free to write a question so I can collect it and I'll grade that and return it to you next time. But let's have one more vote then in the state of Indiana. You don't have to change your vote, just whatever you feel from what we learned about prohibition from the past year. So again, we're voting, should we make marijuana legal for people to consume or not? All those who say yay, please raise their hand.
To make it legal.
To make it legal. And all those who say nay. It's okay. Please vote. All right, great. Well, let's go around again real quick. If you've got a little bit of time. Just real quick. We'll start this way. Why would you? If it's the same reason, just give the same reason.
Yeah, it's the same.
So I have another reason to make it legal. I don't smoke, just in case you're an idea for me when this is legal. But when it's illegal, it's always dealt under the table really secretively, and you don't really know what's in your marijuana. But once they've made it legal and it's in dispensaries, people go to the dispensaries to get it, and then you know that it's pure, like it's only marijuana, so it's not as dangerous as what you could get on the streets. And like we've learned from prohibition, like if you make it illegal, people are gonna do it anyways. So you might as well just let it be legal, but be able to control it.
And that's actually a great point. There, with the prohibition, people would just put anything into the alcohol. There's something called Jake leg. People would kind of this weird shake. Basically, it would mess with their minds. The alcohol, like they just put crap poison or whatever, it didn't matter. They just put anything in there, and people would get intoxicated. But it was an intoxication that the body couldn't take and handle, and people would receive permanent brain damage or, damage to their organs and their bodies and kill people. Like, it wasn't regulated, so they could put whatever they wanted. Oh, moonshine.
Or they like waste it to make it more addictive, so that you go back to that same person to get your day off the prices up every time.
Yeah.
Well, I got this.
Well, any other?
Colorado.
You're okay? All right, thank you. Any reason for maybe why you would vote for making it legal?
Well, initially I said no because morally I just don't believe in that. But if everything that I believed in morally was how I wanted it to be, then life would be a lot different than it is. So I mean, even though it's something I don't necessarily want or believe in, like Greg was saying, I think for people that do, it's safer.
Great, thank you.
Same reason.
Same reason. No, that's great. Voting's awesome. Make sure you vote. All right. Well, ring a ding ding, the bells ring. All right, class. Oh, thank you for coming. Please go hit your papers.